My biggest life lesson is...
I'm going to say it. To trust my gut. My biggest life lesson is to know your truth and trust your knowing. Know that you're a good person. Humans are flawed. There's no such thing as perfect. And if you're just showing up in your best version of yourself, that's the best that you can do. You do your best with what you've got when you've got it. And, that's the best advice I can give.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Finding the Upside, the podcast where we talk about navigating life and business and all the messy things that come with it to try to find a lesson and find the upside. Welcome today to our special series, Bossing Up One Tough Chick. Today, I have in the studio Stacey Uhrig, and I am so excited to start this series where we will be interviewing women entrepreneurs who have started their own business, and they share their journey, all the challenges and the lessons that they have to inspire more women to become entrepreneurs. Welcome, Stacey, to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
So excited to have you here today. So I wanted to give a little bit of an introduction, tell you who Stacey is. Stacey is the mindset flipper, and Stacey has had an amazing bossing up journey. She started a company with her husband and family way back, closed that business, and created a whole new career that really tapped into her true gifts of intuition, compassion, and personal strength. She is known as America's Mindset Flipper, and she brings emotional strength, resilience, and post-traumatic wisdom to her clients as a certified trauma recovery coach. She helps people identify patterns and limiting core beliefs developed in childhood and teaches them the tricks and tips to flip that as adults, leading to more joy and connection. As a practitioner, she utilizes modalities like hypnosis and rapid transformation therapy, and Stacey helps her clients gain clarity and empower themselves to look at their challenges through a different lens, flip their mindset to find greater purpose, and most importantly, peace in their lives. So, I have gotten to know Stacey over the years, and I'm so excited to have her share her journey. Tell me, I wanted you to expand on the bio that I took and really tell your story, because it all starts with a story.
It always starts with a story.
Everybody has a journey. Can you share a little bit about the path that you took?
Oh my gosh, to becoming a coach?
Yes.
I mean, I think most coaches will tell you that the wounded become the healers, right? So I think it's really, really rare when somebody becomes a coach, specifically in my case, a trauma recovery coach, where they haven't gone through some sort of trauma themselves. Mm-hmm. So I had a pretty challenging childhood, really kind of starting around 10, 11 years old. And, it was kind of a shit show. And I didn't understand what I was dealing with or why I was dealing with it, but I started struggling at a really young age with anxiety, deep, deep anxiety, probably 13, 14 years old. I mean, this would have been 1985.
Wow.
So nobody really was talking about anxiety then. People didn't talk about trauma or depression or anything. So I really fought hard for therapy in the 80s, which was really fought against.
Sure.
But I pushed and I got it. And, that's really where my journey started.
Yeah.
And then, as you mentioned, I was a business owner. I was in my family's business from 1997 to 2012 when we closed in the middle of Superstorm Sandy. So for people that, are not from New Jersey, Superstorm Sandy was a mess.
Really?
And so, to add insult to injury, we closed our doors during then, and I had a breakdown for sure. And I feel like in my most recent time, that was the most profound because it was the first time I ever surrendered to really what was. Yeah. After like 35 or 30 years up to that point of struggling, I really surrendered to what was. And that was a big moment for me.
Yeah.
And then I kind of last 10 years have been on this massive personal journey of self-development, and the natural progression of that was to take my business skills and build a coaching practice.
It's so interesting, your whole journey. And I think that what I love about your story is that you were doing the thing that everybody does in terms of starting a career in a business and really not kind of understanding your own personal transformation and how that was impacting your life, and then healing that, how that started to lead you to a whole different direction and career and the work that you do.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that's really exciting about your story.
It was really, it was organic. That's the best way I can put it. And, in between the closing of that business and me opening my coaching practice, two things happened. One, I did kind of a turnaround for a small business owner. And I found, from day to day, I didn't really know what I was doing. And some days it was really logistical and procedural and systemic. And other days I was literally providing coaching and therapy to the business owner. And I loved that part of what I did. Mm-hmm. I then moved from that into direct sales. Mm-hmm. And I was really good at direct sales.
Yeah.
But what I really, really loved in that role was building a team and mentoring people who didn't think that they could. Because what I knew in that space, and many people in direct sales, network marketing will agree to this, we all have the same tools, the same training, the same access to the same materials. It's really what happens in between your ears that tells someone that they can or can't, or that they should or shouldn't. Absolutely. And that worry about other people's opinions. It really infiltrates someone's ability to succeed. Yeah. And that, in that role, that was for sure the thing I enjoyed the most. Yeah. And so I just decided at some point, if that's what I enjoy the most, that's where I need to be putting my effort.
And again, like you said, it was so organic, which was great. I know myself as working as a corporate executive, being a leader and leading a team, there's always that element of dealing, because you're dealing with humans, right? Dealing with how to build somebody's confidence and how to get through their own doubt and how to motivate them. And even in my own work as a business owner, working with my clients, many times it's the mindset that stops them from being able to pursue whatever it is they need to pursue or do whatever it is they desire to do. So I would agree that that's an area that is so critical to somebody's being able to pursue that path. And
it's so funny. They don't teach that shit in college.
No.
But
and it's such a mind block, for sure.
It's so crucial to success.
For sure.
So that's how we got to where I am today.
That's amazing. So in your whole journey, even back owning a business with your family and now this transformation of what you do in your career, talk to me about any of the barriers or challenges that you faced becoming that with yourself, your own mindset, your own blocks, your own things. Yeah. Talk to me about some of that.
Okay, so when I owned the business that I had with my family, I was really in the throes, and it's so funny because I just was preparing a presentation on this today. I was so in the throes of where so many of us find ourselves in our 20s and 30s, right? We're really trying to attach our worth and our validity and our value to how we perform. Yeah. And we really ignore all of the signals coming in. So I would say that for me, I really had a tremendous amount of anxiety. When I say I had anxiety, it was just an underlying electric current 24/7. It never, ever, ever really shut off. And I was hustling my ass off for validation from my dad, if I had to be honest, and approval of other people. And it led to extreme burnout. And what I know now, and this is what I was working on earlier today, is there is a high correlation to the signs of developmental trauma and childhood trauma and burnout. I don't really believe you can have burnout without having unresolved childhood challenges, because the reason why you're burnt out is because you're not willing to set boundaries. You're constantly people pleasing. You are constantly seeking people's validation and hustling for that accolade because there's a void.
Yeah, and I think that's really common. That could resonate with a lot of people that don't even know that it's happening. But that behavior is so typical. And I find that even myself in my own journey, trying to wrestle with that internal struggle of hustle, hustle, hustle. Why am I doing this? Like, why am I doing this? I think also a lot of people, entrepreneurs in particular, are what am I after? And then it's a lot of times when they attain it, it's like, okay, but I'm not happy now. Why? I still have some block.
That's
why?
It. But that's it. No, I think you just pinned it. Is I got the money, I got the car, I got the house, I got the promotion, I got more money, I got the bonus, and I'm still not happy. And so when you're on that hustle and you're chasing that dragon, that's the burnout. Yeah. Because now you get to the end, or maybe you're not even at the end, and you're exhausted, you're fatigued, you're completely unfulfilled. And you're saying to myself, well, how is that possible? I acquired everything I was seeking, ... that should make me happy, but I'm not. And that's really where the crux of it is. And that was me. Yeah. I had all the things.
Wow.
And I wasn't unhappy. I couldn't settle my nervous system. I just was in constant trigger anxiety mode 24/7.
Yeah. Well, it's very brave to share that. So thank you for being so vulnerable. And I think that that's something that can resonate. A lot of people resonates with a lot of people. So one of the things that's interesting when I'm looking at this question to ask you, you're the master mind flipper, and understanding that things that are happening to you are not happening to you, but for you. So I'm really interested to ask this question to dig into your own personal journey.
Yeah.
It's very common that a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, CEOs, they highlight specific experiences that they had that at the time were negative, or they thought were negative, but really led them to a different place. And they could look back and say, wow, that set me on a path that really was an opportunity. Can you highlight one of those things in particular for you?
The closing of our business. Okay. I mean, it really was catastrophic.
I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of reasons why it was catastrophic. Number one, it was a 3-year death spiral. That's the way I see it. And I literally used to wake up. Now, I owned it with my brother, my dad, and my husband was a part of the company, but he was not a partner in the company. And in the last 3 years, really, the kickoff for the death spiral was the shutdown of Lehman Brothers. When Lehman Brothers collapsed, it had a catastrophic effect on, we owned a school, and we had a lot of lenders for the school. It was a high-end training company. And all of our lenders pretty much collapsed that night when Lehman Brothers went under, and what was left, they were not going to lend. So it caused this real calamity for us, and we did get very strategic and very creative, but it just wasn't enough. As a woman, I was the only woman executive in that company, and I was not heard, and I was not valued. And I saw that death spiral coming. I was considered the town crier. I was trying in my best non-hysteric way. You see how I'm going with these? Yeah. To really express from a very logical point of view what I was seeing. And I was not being respected and heard. Hence, a further death spiral, a further death spiral. There was a lot of bad decisions made because we all make emotional decisions when our baby's dying. I mean, we had this business for a really long time, and it was blood, sweat, and tears to get it off the ground. At our height, I think we were 60 employees, 16,000 square feet. Like, it wasn't a little mom and pop shop. And, we made a lot of bad decisions personally to basically personal finance it when it couldn't sustain on its own. it is what it is. You make emotional decisions. And I think, you can basically tell yourself, hey, like I'll probably get the money back. But it became clear to me at a certain point that was unlikely to happen. So, all of that's falling down. Tell me the question again.
It's something that was negative at the time.
So this was
that
catastrophic.
Now looking back, you can see it got you where you are.
To get fully like really raw and real, by the time that business did end up closing, which was in the middle of Sandy, we really had no money. And when I say we had no money, people will be like, I have nothing. I'm like, no, we really had no money to raise a family of 4 children 35 miles outside of downtown Manhattan. And I only say that because living near Manhattan is really expensive.
Yeah.
And, I was speechless. I couldn't breathe. I was terrified. Money is the devil in so many different ways. It is we were talking about Dante's Inferno before. It is the great with the horrible. And you can do so many wonderful, beautiful things with money, but the grip that money has on people's sense of security and happiness is very false. And I say this to my clients a lot that are in financial struggle, that there was a day that I was laying on my kitchen floor crying. My youngest was in the crib napping, and my oldest was maybe first grade. And I was crying because I had this aha moment of I had so much anxiety. Here we go again with the anxiety, so much stress. And it was all because I had no money. Kids were healthy.
Yep.
I had a roof over my head. I had literally just enough to make my mortgage and pay my utilities and get food on the table. Like we were really stretched. And I remember thinking to myself, this piece of paper that can be shredded, dissolved in water, cut, burned, buried, has no value in that way, has absolute complete control over how I feel. My happiness, and my sense of security. And without it, I'm terrified. And in that moment, I recognized really clearly, I better figure out another way to feel safe and secure in my life and happy, because I knew what our financial circumstance was. And I knew it was going to be years and years and years. Like it could be a good 3 to 5, 6 years before we're comfortable financially again.
So really what you're saying is that ability to understand that and change your perception or understand your value that you were giving the money was what your failing business was, that set you on a different trajectory to deal with that and to resolve that within yourself.
So when you talk about, worst case scenario to best case scenario, the worst case scenario was I literally didn't know how I was going to pay my mortgage and put food on my table. And then I also felt horrible about myself. And I had so much shame. Like people just make so many stories and assumptions about why somebody doesn't have money. And I knew that they weren't true, but I still had all this extreme shame to be an adult and a family member and not be able to provide that way. But what I recognized in that epiphany, the gift in that was my gratitude for all the things I was taking for granted.
Yeah.
And
such
also
a common thread.
So many clients that I've worked with that, do have financial stress. I work with a lot of women in narcissistic abuse, and financial control and coercive control is really common in that kind of abuse. And they end up losing a lot of financial security. And that on top of all of the other things happening can just feel like the worst stress in the world. So when I'm able to honestly share my story with them, they feel understood and heard.
So you're bringing that in the work you do now.
I do. Yeah. And that's another gift.
Wow.
So I gained, it really was the worst thing we ever went through, and yet the greatest gift we ever received. Yeah, for sure.
Like I said, this is some of the things that you teach and you preach. And so hearing that particular story and how you've reframed that and brought that into what you do now is like the best lesson ever. So thank you for sharing all of that. So it's interesting. You mentioned a couple of things in giving that perspective about being a woman as a leader. And I want to lead you through a little bit of questioning with this topic of specific barriers that women face and, gender equality with women getting the respect and being honored for the traits that they have and being treated differently because those same traits for a man are champions, but for women, sometimes they're labeled and negatively impacted. So if you would allow me, a lot of women talk about the difficulty in gaining respect and being heard and valued for their expertise, their knowledge, their opinions, their strength.
How about their intuition?
Their assertiveness or decisiveness, whatever trait it is that you want to say. It's really unfortunate. It's an unfortunate reality in our society that women really have to work harder at that and that are measured on a different yardstick, right? Do you believe, are you of the opinion that women do have to work harder to maintain that respect? And what do you think we can do it needs to be done in society to continue to equal that? What do you think needs to happen?
So I think what needs to happen is people need to age out. I mean, that's kind of the truth in my opinion. I feel as
Age
though,
out?
Meaning this. The non-female workers of the world that are in the age group of, say, 55 and up were indoctrinated into the workforce through this movement of just this unconscious bias. We can actually use that term. Mm-hmm. This unconscious bias, they're not thinking that they are better than per se, but the environment that they're in is constantly validating who has a voice.
Right.
Okay, so when I say age out, I look at my son's generation, I look at your son's generation, even, say people in their 40s and 30s who are just more, if for lack of a better term, woke, and are more in tune with equality and are being raised, and I can even see it with my teenagers. There's a level of equality just conversationally that I'm seeing amongst the teenagers now where nothing's off the table. And people are seen as valuable in a way that I did not see when we were growing up. I grew up in the 70s and 80s and 90s, right? So when I say age out, it really is like, changing of the guards. I think it's going to be really hard to have a real catalyst change, in my opinion, for people they have no desire to change. Right. And so forgive me for saying it, but I'm thinking like white male 50, 60, 70. Right. There's not a lot of benefit to them to change it up. But as we have this new generation coming in, I just think inherently there is going to be an openness to more of a level playing field.
Well, listen,
I'm curious to what you think about that.
From your mouth to their ears. I don't disagree with you completely. I think that naturally each generation is going to progress, their own thoughts and feelings on this. I think we are in a period of time, and you and I have had a lot of conversation about bias and such, where we are talking about it at least. And I do think that the younger generation is more aware. However, I think there is a pointed pushback on being woke. And, this also, this pushback on criticizing masculinity, right? Which I don't think anybody's criticizing masculinity. I think we're criticizing toxic masculinity and the gender roles and inequality and stereotypes that supports. But I've heard some pushback on that even. So I think it's going to be up to that generation and us, to talk about it and keep it in perspective and look at it from different angles, because people take a black or white position on it. And
as you're talking, I'm thinking of some of the people I know who are transgendered and will be entering the workforce as women.
Yes.
Who didn't necessarily start school as women.
Right.
And, how does that change?
Yeah.
Because part of it's this patriarchal upbringing where women have been taught to be quieter, to be smaller, to be more timid. And when you're not, you're seen as difficult, challenging,
100%.
Yes. So that'll be really interesting because, again, this is all coming up in the culture where there's more acceptance of a lot of different things that we did not have.
Well, and there's at least the attempt of acceptance of those things, right? Without that pushback. But I would agree with you that we'll see. It's the good thing is that it's being discussed on different sides, but definitely it takes all of us, right? It takes all of us to move that needle. I was having a discussion actually with my son and some of his friends who are in their early 20s and on this very topic, and I think that it's important that both men and women do their part in this, right? And in order to be valued, we have to ensure that we are making sure we're asking to be valued on the right things.
But you see, here's where my mindset flipper comes in: is you have to believe that you're valuable.
This is true. So back to the original issues.
This is really where it all comes 100%. Down. Because if you don't feel that you are important, or if you lack self-worth, or you don't feel you're deserving of value, which really starts at a very young age. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. It really happens in your developmental stages between the ages of 0 and, say, 8. That's a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But, that's, I think, the thing is that we both recognize that these stereotypes, this inequality, and this bias and unconscious bias, many times it gets passed on from generations just because of the family structure or whatever.
And I think it's very industry focused, too.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. But, there's definitely work to do. I mean, as a leader in your career, have you ever been labeled in a negative way has impacted you?
Not in this career.
Okay.
Not in coaching. But when I owned the other business, of course, definitely. I mean, here's the sad truth. This is the sad truth. I was one of 3 owners of the business. I was the only female. I'm smart. I know I'm smart. I'm intuitive. I listen. I have good creative ideas. I'm a good creative solution person. And every time my solutions were brought to the table, they were ignored. So I did a test. I went to my friend Jonathan at the time, who worked in my company, and I said, we're going to go into that meeting.
And you're going to present the idea.
I want you to present this.
And how did it play out?
Best fucking thing they've ever heard.
Wow.
It broke my heart. My business was important to me. This really comes down to a father-daughter conflict, which it is. I mean, that's a whole other podcast. So, I love my dad, but there's been a lot of challenges there. And so I kind of swallowed my ego. Pride is a big thing. And I just thought, what do I want for this company? I don't need my dad to hear me right now. What I need right now is for this company to stay afloat.
Right.
And this is a really good idea.
Right.
And if it's going to be heard that way, I'm willing to let it be heard that way. But trust me, when that company closed, I made it very clear. When I say catalyst ideas, I mean things that literally shifted the course of the company. Which ones were my ideas that I strategically had somebody else bring to the table.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that till well after because I didn't have the bandwidth for it.
Yeah. It's sad. I hear from a lot of women leaders that they say that they've been labeled in a negative way. And I can even attest to that, in terms of the assertiveness that you bring, being labeled as difficult, being outspoken, right, for the good, and being passionate about something and being like difficult, contentious, ruffles feathers, things like that. I think it does come down to, as a woman, though, and to be a leader is to not be impacted by that label, but break free of it by owning it. And then, of course, the work that we have to do as a society, and hopefully generationally it will progress, that we can start to see things differently and not label them in that negative way.
So it's interesting. I come up with all these different sayings, and I share them with my clients. And one of them is know your truth and trust your knowing. And when we get labeled, whether it's direct or indirect, like we kind of know it's being said about us, but we haven't really heard it, but you can get the vibe. If I were to coach somebody through that, I would really have them focus on the things that they know to be true about themselves. And ... does somebody else's opinion of you or lack of validation of what you know to be true more important than what you know to be true? Because you can know your truth, but the crucial part to this is trusting yourself and trusting that your knowing is spot on and not needing access to outside validation for your truth to be true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I actually collaborated on a book. I'm so excited for it to come out, but it's talking about the power of labels. And I think it was maybe 25 or 30 women that each wrote a chapter. I wrote one as well about a label that negatively impacted you, and the story of how it affected you negatively and how you broke free of that label or owned it and flipped it.
Oh, I love this.
So can you guess what mine was?
I would rather you tell me.
Bossy. And I flipped that and owned it to decisive.
It's like, how many guys are being called bossy?
They're not.
It's so obnoxious. And it really starts when we're like 2.
For sure.
Son of
a. So we talked, about gender inequality, and I think we actually touched on a little bit. There's a lot of talk and attention about other types of inequality. As a leader, as an entrepreneur, just in the business world and in society in general, what other types of inequality have you witnessed and believe we need to address, and why? I know we could have a whole podcast on that. But,
tell me where it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You can go from socioeconomic to gender, sexual orientation, color of your skin. It's everywhere. And, what I think is the missed part, because it's so simple, is we're all just human in the sense that we're literally just all made up of the same shit.
Yeah.
And whatever it is that's a threat to someone else, that becomes the determining factor.
Yeah. And, it's what's sad, I think, is that, again, this whole pushback of this wokeness, where we're starting to talk about these things, where these uncomfortable truths that we have to face. Unfortunately, the pushback on that is like, we don't need to have this in our workplaces, or it impacts the culture of the team.
But who's saying that they don't want it? It's the people that
you just described.
Have the privilege.
Yeah, it's the people that you just described that I feel like they're losing something. And we're all humans, right?
Exactly.
And understanding the unconscious bias, the unequal treatment, and how that plays out in a team environment as an entrepreneur, leading a team in a company, setting the company culture, it impacts the ability for that group, that unit, to be successful cohesive. So it's things that have to get addressed. And as a leader, and as an entrepreneur, as you build your team, you have to make sure that you're checking your own bias to be able to address the things that are occurring, to build that team and have it function.
No doubt.
Yeah. We could talk.
We literally could do an entire,
We might.
You could do an entire podcast show, just on, not just an episode, but like an entire series.
More to come on that. Maybe we will. So now I want to bring you into a group of questions, again, that is right in your sweet spot with regard to mindset, but particularly barriers to growing and maintaining your success. Talk to me a bit about mindset and self-doubt. I know you touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to say that it's really common for many business owners to struggle to believe in their own ability to create their vision. And their own ability to really push what they want to do. I hear things like this all the time from my clients who are trying to build a business, or even some of my colleagues. Can I really do this? Who do I think I am? Right? Doubting their own value, thinking too small. I want to create $1 million business. I want to create a multi-million-dollar business. Did you have moments of doubt? And how did you go through that and change your own mindset?
Yeah, so... it's funny. I just came back. I mean, this is January. So in October, I went to a 3-day intensive with Mary Morrissey in Dallas. And it was really interesting. I was brought as a guest of someone there, and I didn't really know who Mary Morrissey was at the time. Do now. She's a brilliant thought leader in kind of the mindset space. And she talked a lot about the whisper. They talked a lot about these quiet whispers that we all hear. So for a long time, I had heard this quiet whisper of, you need to be coaching, right? You need to be, what I was hearing in my head is, you need to make an income by making an impact, a bigger impact. But the voice in my head, the other voice, right? The conflicting voice was, who the fuck are you? You don't have a psychology degree. You're not a social worker. You're not a therapist. You'd have to ... And I didn't like hearing those voices, but they were really as loud as, the whisper of become a coach. And so I kind of like hemmed and hawed, and I kind of kept this as like a secret to myself of like, I really desired this, but I didn't even want to tell anybody about it, because I didn't even know that it would result in anything. So then that was even worse, right? I can want to crush the dream I'm not even sharing with anyone. But then I contacted a few friends of mine that had PhDs in psychology. And I was like, this is where I'm stuck. And they all said the same thing. And this is funny. And this is no diss to Tony Robbins, because I think he's great. But they all said the same thing. Guy doesn't have a single cred. Like he didn't go and become a life coach and do but he had really great wisdom to share.
Right. There's many people.
That's what you have.
Yeah.
And there's value in that wisdom. Yeah. And so I had to get comfortable with that idea. Yeah. But for sure, when I was thinking about starting this coaching practice, that was definitely a self-doubt piece. Yeah.
It's such a common thread. And I think that many people that go to create a business have the same issues and doubt that, and whatever it is that they're doubting. But agreed, I think what you touched on with, not having the credentials, right, is one of the things that I've definitely seen is you have something to say, and there's many people who have something to say, and nobody's going to say it or give that perspective like you do, right?
Thank you.
And I think that's something that we all, or anybody out there who has knowledge that they want to share, has to own and come to terms with, because it doesn't really matter what school you went to or what kind of letters you have after your name. Nobody's going to say it like you and have the experience and perspective.
Well, it's funny that you should say that, because of course I have my own coach, and I tend to hire coaches that are pretty spiritually connected. And I did end up going back to school, but I didn't go back for the credential per se. I went back because I was fascinated on the topic.
Of course, the content, yeah.
And I couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah.
So I went back and I got certified in hypnosis and rapid transformational therapy, and then later on as a trauma recovery coach. And I remember my coach saying to me, she's very spiritually collected, almost like medium. She goes, your guides are telling me to tell you to stop. Like there's you don't need any more letters after your name. You don't need any more, like, you have the knowledge.
Yeah.
And what I said to her is, okay, well, can you just tell them I'm not doing it for the cred? I'm doing it because I want to be learning and learning and learning even more from different points of view. And I also love being in these environmental settings with other people that are as geeked out about this as I am.
Yeah.
This is for me.
Yeah.
It's not for the credential.
Right. Understood.
So that was a really interesting thing to understand about myself.
I love that you shared that, and thank you for bringing that up, because that's, I think, one of the unique things that as an entrepreneur and as a business owner is to understand being an infinite learner is not a bad thing, right? It's like you have to have that craving, for new information and the ability to master certain things to move, yourself and your business to the next place. So I applaud you for that. And for sure, anybody out there, craving that knowledge and seeking it, obviously you don't want to not take action, right? Because I think there's some people who do that, where they learn, but don't take action.
Yeah.
But for sure, being that infinite learner is such an important piece of continuing to be successful and grow and maintain your success, for sure. So you have a very unique perspective in terms of building that family business, as you spoke of. And now, as your new career, you are a one-man show, or do you have a team again?
No, I'm a solopreneur.
Okay, solopreneur.
It's
so
tough.
Two different. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, for many years I had no infrastructure. I had outsourced project people and things like that.
I have that, but
now I have a team, and it's a whole different game. So you have both perspectives as well.
Yeah.
But talk to me about, for those who are listening, in terms of I'm trying to bring out the barriers to being successful in a business, and talk a little bit about barriers to capital. So my specific questions are, in either case, your family business that you started, what were the obstacles in funding the dream that you have? Even today, there's so many ways that people build businesses, right? People borrow money from friends or family, start out doing it as a side hustle while working a full-time gig. Some get a loan, some take VC money. Share with us your experience, if you will, in either side, the route you took to start out.
Well, it's interesting because with the family business, it was self-funded to begin with. And then, as we grew and grew and grew, banks were really saying, let us help you be a part of that, right? Because they're going to make money on that too. And that did help us excel our growth for sure. We had loans up against assets and receivables, and it was a smart business move to do it that way. What was interesting was, because of the way that business closed in such a traumatic way, when it came to this business, I was very fearful of spending money. And I made the conscious decision not to take out a loan. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that I did have a successful run with network marketing. And honestly, if anybody's ever interested in network marketing, I highly recommend it. I still have great, recurring income that still comes through from that business. And I don't really work it anymore. And that's a choice, just because I want to put my efforts where I want.
That was
my
a little
efforts.
bit of the intermediary with you transferring from owning the business, closing it down, and then
I'm still
to this
a
career.
Consultant within that organization, and it's been 7 years.
Yeah.
But I had quite a bit of money saved from that business, and I used that to seed and fund the coaching practice. Because when I did want to go to school, it wasn't cheap, and we're always going to still be in rebuilding mode within my family because of how damaging financially it was to close that other business. So I didn't want to go to my husband and ask to take money out of that account that we were so, desperately trying to regrow. And I didn't really want to go take a business loan either. So I had enough money saved, and more than that, to be able to fund and seed. So I think having a side hustle to fund and seed your full hustle, that really,
Yeah.
really worked out very, very well for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a common path that people take, and one that definitely can be advantageous to start out, especially if you have that full-time job and then can get that going. One of the things that I see happen with a lot of business owners is, as you said, banks start to come and investors start to come when you're successful and want to offer you money or acquire a piece of your business.
Yeah.
Whether you did that or not, I have my own opinions about that. I've had people approach me as well. Talk to me about, what is your position about taking either VC money or allowing people to buy a piece of your business? Would you do it? Would you advise it? Had you done it? What are your thoughts?
I mean, look, I can say this now, but it's not being offered to me, so who's to decide what I would say? But my gut tells me I would not do it. But I think it's absolutely personal. For me, as a coach, what I do is very personal. Yeah. And it's very singular, and it's very one-to-one approach. I do have dreams and visions of making my knowledge available to people on a more one-to-many basis, because I think the message that I'm sharing is really important, and it can help a lot of people. But typically, this is my experience, when VC money is being offered or banks are, interested in offering a loan, they want a good return on investment, and they're going to want you to expand, and they usually want you to do it in a pretty quick way so they can make their money back. And I just don't see that as a play in this particular business for me.
Agree.
Because it's so intimate. And, if you were to grow in this kind of business the way I'm doing it now, quickly and rapidly, I think you lose what makes it so unique and special, right? So for me personally, I would not. But I think it is an individual decision, and I think depending on what your product or service is, it's worth considering.
Yeah, I would agree. It's definitely an individual decision. I think one of the things for me, and one of the things I believe is, one of the things you have to understand is, if you are taking VC money or you are having people take a percentage of your business, you then do lose the autonomy. So in your
100%.
situation, or anybody that does any custom work and, intimate work like you do, really can't give up that control. I personally wouldn't either, and then also VC, I had one client that I was helping that talked about, she grew it very slowly because she knew that if she took money, they were going to want her to do it cheaper. And she didn't want to sacrifice her own values of how she built the company and how she built, and it was a product, and how, what her vision was. And so I think you're right. It is personal, but those are all sides to consider.
Yeah.
Is, that's one of the things. Now, that's another reason why it gives credit to building it as a side hustle, so you can get it going while you still have either a network marketing gig or a full-time gig or what have you. So,
the one thing I would say with regards to, do you take the money or whatever, I think that the person that finds themselves in that challenge, or that, it's not even really a quandary, it's just, what do I do here?
Right.
Is to make sure that you're making a decision from an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset.
For sure.
Right? So the scarcity mindset would be, without it, I would never be able to do it. And this is my only chance. And abundance is, what I want is available to me. And if I put in the work and I put in the time and I set the intention appropriately, the right opportunity will come. Right? We don't want people making decisions on that out of fear.
For sure. So another barrier to growing, and I hear this a lot from business owners, a big pain point in growth is maintaining quality. And I'm curious, with regard to not your current situation, but the training company, did you face this issue?
Oh, yeah.
And how did you address it? And the things you did they work?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay.
I mean, look, the reality is when you start as a shop of 3 people and you end up at your height, you're largest at 60 people, there are growing pains. And part of the growing pain is your vision being executed in the way that you want your vision executed. And then, of course, it comes down to hiring the right people who have the same vision, right? And that the vision is as important to them and that their why is as important as yours for why they're doing the work. And then hopefully, if it is, the quality will be good. But if you're not hiring well and you're doing it rapidly and the reason for doing the work is not in alignment to your core values for why it should be done a certain way, there will always be a lack of quality.
Yeah.
And then I think what it really boils down to is swift corrective action. It's really getting very, very clear quickly so you can try to change course. And if you can see that it's not working, then really change extreme course and maybe let that person go. But what ends up happening is too many people get hung up on wanting to be liked. And so they're not really as clear with their messaging. And they're so afraid that if they let somebody go or if they tell them to do it differently, that person's going to be upset with them. And, this is when we come down to and say it's a business.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that can occur. And, there's so much nuance to this. One of the things in what I do and I help businesses grow and scale is what we look at is lots of things. It doesn't just come down to people. It comes down to the whole things we were talking about before. What is the culture? What's the vision? Do the people know? Are they engaged? There's lots of ways to engage people. It's not necessarily always who did you hire. It's how did you onboard them? How did you train them? What are your systems like? Do you have systems? In order to grow from 3 to 60, you've got to put some automation and processes in place
no doubt.
To maintain that quality. So there's so much nuance to be able to scale in that. And, there's so many areas where it could go wrong. So that's one of the things. But
here's the thing: is it's going
that.
to go wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Like but the mistakes you're going to have it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
You should fail.
Right.
Like
because that's how you learn.
That's how you're going to learn. Like you have to attempt. God knows how many times. In order to make it right and solid.
Right. And it's not a bad thing to find an issue in how you're producing or what is the workflow like?
Correction.
Right. Workflow like.
Yeah. The course correction is constant.
Yeah.
And if you're not course correcting, you're not being innovative enough, in my opinion.
Agreed. We agree on that.
Yeah.
So I've come to my final section, which is the lessons learned and takeaways. And so before we get into some of these rapid fire questions, I just wanted to kind of set the stage here. You just said it. We all make mistakes on our journey, for sure. If you think about your whole entrepreneurial experience, can you come up with what the biggest mistake you made was and why?
I mean, the thing that comes to my mind really quickly was the work-life balance. I had none of it when I owned the family business. And part of that was because as a woman, it was not respected. If I'm a partner, it was really a mismessaging, right? You're a partner just like I am, ... all the other men. And so therefore you should show up, ... just like we do. But they're going home to meals made and laundry done and dishes done and diapers cleaned and whatever. And I'm not. And so I quickly started setting boundaries, right? And that was not very well received. Tell me that question again.
What was your biggest mistake you made?
So
and
my
why?
biggest mistake was not listening to my gut. And my gut was no, to say no.
Wow.
And to push back. And because nothing broke my heart more than the person that was at home with my child calling me at 5:30, 6 o'clock and saying, I did my best to try to keep him up, but he's already asleep. Fuck me.
Yeah. And then you missed
the worst.
Yeah.
The worst feeling for me personally. Because, look, my kids are adopted. I busted my butt to build my family. I went through years and years and years of infertility and nothing really meant more to me than having a family, except for receiving accolades and validation from my dad.
Right.
And I couldn't get both.
No.
So I ended up having to drop one, and it wasn't my kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was the biggest mistake I made, was really not sticking with my boundaries and listen to my gut earlier on.
I think that this could be a handbook for many women, entrepreneurs and leaders.
It is really tough stuff.
Yeah,
and
for
being
real.
this is a big part of what I was working on today, was the boundary setting, and the lack thereof is leading to such extreme burnout.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really unnecessary.
For sure. What is the best piece of advice that you followed that you believe helped you become a better entrepreneur?
Listen to your gut.
Okay, I love it. Conversely, what is the worst piece of advice you received on starting or running your business?
Don't listen to your intuition. Go with just the data and the facts.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
right?
No.
Right.
Okay, what is the number one piece of advice you would give to someone who's working on building or growing their business?
Trust your gut.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, really.
Let's print the bumper sticker.
I mean, this really, we should make this into a bumper sticker. It really comes down to that. And
Yeah.
it goes back to what I said before, know your truth and trust your knowing. And that is the gut.
Love it. So I am always ending the interview for One Tough Chick by asking everyone to share what I call my life lesson. Can you complete this sentence? My biggest life lesson is...
You know, I'm going to say it. To trust my gut. My biggest life lesson is to know your truth and trust your knowing. Know that you're a good person. Humans are flawed. There's no such thing as perfect. And if you're just showing up in your best version of yourself, that's the best that you can do. You do your best with what you've got when you've got it. And, you know, that's the best advice I can give.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being so vulnerable. Thank you for sharing your personal journey. I look forward to another episode with another female boss, One Tough Chick. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on the next episode of Finding the Upside. Thank
Awesome.
you so much.
It was so good.